Okay, so let's take a look at how you can draw scatter plot using Seaborn library in Python. So first thing, we will open terminal and we'll be installing Seaborn as well as Jupyter Lab, right? So let me clear this. Then let's switch to another drive. Here I will make sure to verify if I have Python. So Python double dash version, and it will show me the version installed. Then I will move on to using pip install and then Seaborn. Okay, I need to also use Jupyter dash lab, right? Once we have these two things installed, can go and run Jupyter dash lab, right? And then the next thing would be to writing the code to display our scatter plot, right? So let's wait for it to open my default browser. In this case that would be Edge. Right now the Jupyter Lab dashboard should give you option to either open console or Jupyter Notebook. So you can pick the Jupyter Notebook. As you can see, it will load the default notebook, right? So what we do is import Seaborn as SNS, right? Then we can also use SNS set, and then we use style parameter and then mention white grid, right? And after that we will be calling for one of the data sets. So fmri sns dot load underscore data set, right? So this is the fmri and we are going to import that for our scatter plot. So sns dot scatter plot, and then we will pass some of the data set parameters like time point. Then also there is a signal that should be on y, and then data which should be fmri, right? And once we go for that, we can run to display the most basic scatter plot, right? If you have other data set installed, say for tips, Titanic, or maybe the iris one, you can also use that for drawing the scatter plot, right? So let's run this and let's see what it shows, right? When you want to change the data set, all you have to do right now is simply replace this fMRI with any other data set. So this one is the default that would come up when we pass fMRI data to scatterplot function. Along with, we mention where what type of parameters would go. So x-axis would get time point, whereas y-axis gets signal, right? And it should draw your basic scatter plot, right? We can also modify some of the parameters, right? We can plot the scatter plot with data point sorted by category. So let's say here if I choose to add hue, which would be taking the region, right? And I can also adjust the style, for which I can use event. Then finally we already have our data, right, which is fMRI, right? So if I run this, let's see what it does. You will get the legend showing the event, right? Because we used the style event for the legend, and it will also reflect in our scatter plot. right? Rest of the things we have kept it as is to group the data point by category within our scatter plot, right? Now let's totally change few of the parameters. Say instead of fMRI we use tips dataset, right? And then from this point onwards I can simply use SNS dot scatter plot and x set to day for the tip and y set to tip. So day versus tip is how we want the data to appear. So basically this is our tips database, right? So we managed to get the tips, right? So let's see if it draws the basic scatter plot, right? As you can see, day versus tip and the data that we passed from tips dataset, right? So let's say if I want to draw something different, like say if I want to add the marker, I'll have to just use marker equals to, within a quote I can use T and then comma. If I run this, it should also include that. However, if there are any errors, it will show you. Okay, so it should be marker and not market. So the spelling mistake caused the error. So at the bottom there is, okay, so this should be plus, let's see. Okay, so as you can see it requires symbol and I accidentally use T, so it should use your symbols, right? So as a marker symbol used to draw the scatter plot, right? There is also hue we can use here. So let's see, hue set to time, so that adds more variable and it will get the legend that shows lunch and dinner, right? So we managed to add the attribute, also use two attributes here, marker and hue, right? So apart from that there is also style one. So if I also use style and say again I use time for the same and run, it should show you the variation in scatter plot for that particular attribute, right? Then we have few things like say if I choose to play with say size set to size and then comma, and you will notice that legend now shifted to the center showing the size 1 to 6 and lunch and dinner time. Now if I also manipulate palette equals to pastel and then comma, if I run this it should change the color palette to pastel. Now if I say if I choose alpha set to 0.4, that should also change the transparency, right? Notice the days transparency for each type of color palette. Finally there is also legend, so we can change legend to brief and then if I use comma it should show me something like this. So legend continues to stay in the center, which we can manipulate to put at the top, but it would kind of get in the way of our data, so it shifted to the center, right? So these are some of the things that you can do with scatter plot, right? The typical title, the next equatic values, those are also possible depending on your plot, right? There is also color bar, but with scatter plot making use of point data, the color palette and gradient won't work well. So make sure to try out some of the other attributes and parameters as well to see what is possible with scatter plot.